Hello. I hope you had a good November and had a chance to do some reading. Is it just me, or did it feel like the month went by so fast and now we're already in December and very close to the end of the year? But I did have a chance to read 6 books over the course of the last month. So I want to have a casual chat about my thoughts and feelings about all of these books, but also just to briefly mention a couple fun bookish things that I got to do in November. So I was able to go to the Booker Prize ceremony. I made a whole vlog about this experience, but it was such a privilege to be able to go, and it's always so exciting. And it felt like more than most years, the room was filled with a lot of authors and past winners and past nominees, and because authors are kind of like celebrities to me, they are my like big celebrities. That is so exciting being there in the room, and it was really fun to be there with my friend Bernie. So we were just spotting authors left and right. It's like, oh, there's Alan Hollinghurst, whose novel I'm currently reading, and there's Ben Ockery, and yeah, so many authors. And so we got a chance to speak with Douglas Stewart and Eleanor Catton, and I had a really fun chat with the author and judge Sarah Collins, whose novel The Confessions of Franny Langton won prizes. It's such a great novel, and yeah, and she was a judge on this year's prize, and so that was all really exciting and fun, and great to see Samantha Harvey won for Orbital. And because I'd gone to the readings the night before, I got a chance to have my book signed by her, and I was so privileged that she recognized who I was, and so I was telling her about how much I loved her novel, and then she just leaned forward and took my hand and said, "And can I just say how grateful I am for everything that you do for books?" And I was like, "Oh wow, you know who I am." So yeah, that was really wonderful and special. And yeah, this novel, I know it wasn't every reader's favorite, especially readers I think that enjoy a really strong plot-driven novel. You know, this is much more a mood and following these different astronauts as they're circling the globe and reflecting upon the world and their own past experiences and their relationship with each other. But I'm looking forward to rereading this at some point, because I've heard from multiple people that a rereading of this book, you know, gives even more depth to the experience and really reveals a lot of the complexity of the story and the tale that she's created. So that was, yeah, such a great experience. When I was sat down and when I arrived at the ceremony, I was told I was going to be sat at table 1, and I thought, oh, table 1, that sounds very important. But no, it was just the first table, and it was sort of like on the side, so I was a bit in the corner of the room for the actual ceremony, and so when the winner was about to be announced, I kind of moved over and was standing at the back so I could get a much clearer view. But of course, I'm very grateful to just be in the room, and yeah, it was such a wonderful experience and evening. And I also got to go see Ali Smith talk about her new novel Glyph. Again, I'd seen her talk about this book a few months ago before it even came out, but because my friend Anna James was hosting the Lush Book Club with Ali Smith as a guest, of course, I wanted to go along because it's always such a joy and pleasure to see Ali Smith talk about her work and her passion for language and literature, and she's so inspiring. So if you ever get the chance to see Ali Smith, I highly recommend hearing her talk or look up some interviews with her. But yeah, they had such a wonderful discussion about this book, which has a lot of like darkness in it, but also Ali Smith's sort of characteristic playfulness in language. And I just I think this book is so interesting, really speaks to our current times, even though it's set in a slightly sort of dystopian times. But she calls it her like pony dystopian book because yeah, there's also about a wonderful sibling relationship and their connection with a horse, and there were also cakes there, and so yeah, it was just a really warm, wonderful, convivial environment and event. So that was such a pleasure to go to. So I'm going to go through and talk about all of the books that I read over the past month, and starting with a debut novel called The Fertile Earth by Ruthvika Rao. And This is set in southern India, where it's primarily or begins in the mid 1950s, and following a village and two sets of siblings. And so there are two daughters who are the daughters of a very wealthy local family who are landowners that kind of preside over the entire village and are the main employers of the village. And then there are two boys, brothers, who are the sons of a working class mother who's single, but they form a connection and friendship with the daughters of this wealthy family, and especially around a series of events when there's a man-eating tiger on the loose around in the area in the surrounding jungle, and so they set off on a quest to try to track down and kill this tiger. And so it's about the consequences, the long-standing consequences of that, but also more broadly about changes that are going on in India during this time. And it follows two of these individuals in particular, one of the boys and one of the girls, as they get older, as they progress through the world. But each of these sets of siblings, they make very different choices, and they go through so many different experiences that are kind of connected to the changing political and social landscape of the country as it's moving from a more like feudal and caste-driven system to a different way of organizing and of the government, and how there are communist inspired revolutionary groups at the time, and how these characters sort of get involved, or the consequences of the actions of some of these revolutionary groups, and how this affects both them personally and their families and their communities and the wider country around them. And it's also like a romance story. It's also about friendship, and what's so like immediately wonderful about this story and novel is that it is so atmospheric and like sensory driven. It kind of hits all the senses, in that the way the author describes the community and the vivid colors of the orchard and the landscape and the jungle, but also the smells of that orchard and the taste of the fruit from it. And it was all so vivid and clear, and that made it so pleasurable to read about, but also getting to know these characters more, and their complexities and the challenges to their relationships to each other as time goes on, and as a number of different like political and revolutionary events occur. And so I thought this was a really fantastic debut novel, and really powerful book that I enjoyed reading so much. And I also read Gerrard Conley's first novel, although this author is very famous for writing a memoir called Boy Erased, where he was sent to a religious conversion therapy by his parents, who wanted him to like kind of pray the gay away. And this is set in colonial America, and following a small community of a religious community that was founded by a preacher who's kind of at the center of the book. And then there's a local village physician, and these two men had a romantic relationship with each other, and the secrets of that, and the difficulty of living with and dealing with homosexuality at this period of time in history. But it's also about how this affects the people around them. So they're both married, they both have children, and so how this hidden secret that they have and their connection with each other really affects both them and their families and the community around them. And I enjoyed that he took this different perspective on it, rather than just following like the intensity of each of these characters' lives, but it does move into the perspectives of their wives and their children, and I'm sort of glad that he did that, but at the same time, I felt like it was slightly too ambitious, in that there's one of their children, and it's kind of following this child at a later date, when this child has become more of an adult, and sort of dealing with the consequences and long-term repercussions of the relationship that their father had with another man. But at the same time, yeah, it felt just slightly too stilted, like the way it was written. I mean, it's very much inspired by kind of the writing of Nathaniel Hawthorne, and is in that sort of mode of writing. And I've always found Nathaniel Hawthorne's writing a bit too antiquated in the way that he kind of constructs and relates his stories, and so to have a modern novel that's emulating that, talking about a subject which couldn't have been written about and talked about at the time, it didn't feel like the best way of approaching this historical story for me. So I did really appreciate and enjoy certain parts of this book, especially one of their daughters named Sarah, who's a very like strong and vibrant character, and she's really the one that stuck out the most to me, and the one that was the most like complex and interesting. But it was also compelling, following how there were secret queer communities at this time that were kind of underground and were a community, but yeah, obviously weren't able to be open in a way, and had to be very secretive about how they worked together. So yeah, I had mixed feelings about this, but I think Conley is a really strong writer, and I hope he does produce more work. And I also read a Uruguayan eco-dystopian novel called Pink Slime by Fernanda Trias, translated by Heather Cleary. And so this novel is narrated by a woman in a time when poisonous algae has polluted all of the waters, and she lives on a coastal town, and all of the, or almost all of the fish have died. The ones who haven't died have kind of mutated, and this has released a lot of poison into the atmosphere, and there are these red winds that will sort of sweep through the community and are poisonous, and anyone who gets caught up in them will be subject to this horrible condition where their skin basically starts shedding off, and so it's all quite terrifying and horrible. A lot of people have left or been evacuated from this coastal area, but she remains there, and has this strong like connection to it, and there are three people in her life who she still regularly sees, and who are quite important to her. So there's her mother, who previously she had a very difficult relationship with, and but now they've kind of made a reconciliation during this time of environmental strife. And there's her husband, who she's separated from, and that she's known her entire life, but who's a very difficult man, and he's been hospitalized in this special care unit because he has been infected, but he hasn't died, and so they're kind of studying him. And then there is a boy who she is charged with working with, because his parents have kind of like hired her to care for their son, who has this condition where he has this insatiable appetite, and that he'll just eat anything within sight, whether it's actually food or not, and a kind of bottomless hunger which can't be satiated. And of course, food has become very scarce during this time, and one of the ways the government has tried to make up for this food shortage is they've created a food plant that creates this pink slime, which is food and meant to be nutritious, but is just this kind of disgusting sounding product. And so this novel is really interesting on a number of levels. I mean, first, it was quite beautifully written, and the description of it. I mean, the way she describes this kind of like technicolor world is really powerful and vivid, and that made it very atmospheric. But also the tension of her situations and how I was able to like relate to this. I mean, there's a lot of experiences of where they're forced to stay inside when there are warnings of the red wind is coming through, and this felt very reminiscent of the recent pandemic and the experiences of lockdown and being forced to stay inside. So I was able to relate to a number of passages in that way, but also how she describes this individual's plight of strange sense of timelessness, of being in this world and caught in this situation, in this kind of in between period, and there's. At one point in the novel, it kind of shifts between more being in the present and then realizing that she is narrating from a point in the future, and she is at some point that is beyond this kind of where this ecological disaster where the world is crumbling around her, and it's exploring the sense of like maintaining a sense of hope and purpose in the world when it feels like the world is crumbling around you. And I think that's probably something that a lot of us can relate to, especially over the past few years. And but also it's like structured and narrated in a really interesting way. So you're following her perspective, but then you also get these short sections in between chapters where there's a dialogue occurring between two people, and it's never named who it is, although I can make some guesses from indications that are made in different parts of the narrative, but are these passages of dialogue that are more reflecting on wider experiences in the world, and that become almost philosophical, but in a very like down to earth and conversational way. And so I found this this novel to be really fascinating and really vividly written, and I thought it was really striking and original. And another novel that I read that I enjoyed so much is A Little Trickerie by Rosanna Pike. And this is another historically set novel, this time in the late 1500s, I think, in England, and follows a girl who has a single mother who is a very strong-willed and charismatic individual, and she dies very early on in the novel, so that's not really a spoiler, but this girl, this adolescent girl, is left on her own as a vagabond, moving from place to place and doing what she can to survive, meeting a precious few people along the way who are very helpful and who she is able to form a connection with, and then there are other people who take advantage of her and who are just awful people, and so she has to be very cunning in order to survive, and this eventually leads to a ruse that she creates to try to get some money, and where she basically pretends to be an angel from heaven, and this is based on a real historical case where a girl from this time period pretended to be an angel and to kind of cheat people out of their money, and so this is a time when religion was very prevalent and very influential, and there were certain individuals in the church who took advantage of their power and for their own financial gains and benefits, and sometimes through trickery, where they would have something that they would present like a relic, and then get people to donate money or to create something which they pretended was a miracle, and in other times used religion as a way to persecute people that were different from themselves. And so the girl at the center of this, she's very much an outsider, and she creates a band of outsiders who she teams up with. And what's so striking about this book is the power of her voice, as she's narrating this story. She's very charismatic. Her turns of phrase are so delicious, and just in how she frames things and describes things in a way that I just found so humorous, but then there's lots of serious issues she's dealing with. She undergoes a lot of trauma, and the way that is portrayed and is very moving as well. Of how she's experienced some really awful things and finds it difficult emotionally to get through them. That it's this physically and mentally like manifests in her life as she's trying to go forward, and but also how this portrays a gay man who she becomes very close with, and his plight over time, and the persecution that he experiences, but also his conflicted feelings during this time, because he's also someone that is like born in the church, and I think she really shows this like religious conflict really well, and points out that even though there was a lot of flouting of power in the church and abuse of that power, that there were also some people who are religious, who are good, who really were sticking to the tenets of religion and the message and meaning of it. And so I think it is a book that, explores this in a complex way, while also telling this really vivid story of a time period from centuries ago, and to create this whole atmosphere and period, and the tension of whether she will get away with this grand act of trickery that she's created or not, and the tension of the story, and is built up really well, and also how it is structured. So we get this point from her gay friend from a future point, who is locked in prison, and his predicament, and then we follow her narrative sort of leading up to this point and a bit beyond that, I thought this was just a great book, and such a pleasure to read, especially at this time of year. I also read Anita Brookner's novel Hotel du Lac for the first time. This was a Booker Prize winner, and this follows a woman who's a romance novelist, who travels to Switzerland to a hotel just as the sort of holiday season is coming to an end, and so there's not many people in this upscale hotel, and she has gone there purportedly to finish writing her book, but really she has left England, where she comes from, for other reasons, and there's this kind of cloud and mystery of why she left the country, and we follow her as she stays at this hotel and is writing letters home to someone that she was romantically involved with, and giving him her observations about the few really interesting residents of this hotel, and how everyone who's come to this hotel kind of has their own issues that they have come here to get away from. And so it's exploring the many mysteries behind these different characters, but also the connection she starts to form with them over time, in their very polite way of people of a few people in a large hotel, upscale hotel, over a period of time. And I really enjoyed following the little observation she makes about all these characters who are so expressive in their personalities, and but also the irony that this is a romantic novelist that is caught up in her own very difficult romantic situation, but how even more so how this is part of being a part of society, and having certain expectations put upon her, and the challenges when trying to rebel against those expectations to follow her own desires, and so it's a really interesting and layered story that's such a pleasure to read. Like, I think on the surface it feels like there's not much going on. She's just sort of living at this hotel and observing all the other residents, but then there are small details giving speaking to the larger mysteries going on kind of below the surface of this story. So yeah, I thought this was a great novel. And finally, I read Alan Hollinghurst's new novel, Our Evenings, with my online book club. So we had a lot of great discussions about this, and I really took my time reading this fairly long book. It's almost 500 pages, but Alan Hollinghurst's writing in sentences and the quality of the language he uses, I mean, it's so rich and evocative that it's a story that's well worth taking time with, as it follows a man named Dave Wynn from his adolescence and going to boarding school for the first time throughout his life and into his 60s when he's reflecting back upon his life. And it's a novel that's very evenly divided in that the first half of the book is following his adolescence and teenage years at this boarding school, and then the second half follows his later years and follows at a fairly swift pace, sort of skipping through the years, and each chapter is kind of like a little island of experience that he's remembering, and a different memory of his, and how he evokes these periods from his past, and how these scenes and moments in his life that have they might not all have like a huge significance in terms of like sort of life events, but are ways of kind of crystallizing his experience as a man who is mixed race and is gay, and who comes from a working class background. His mother is a seamstress and single, and his father was Burmese, but he has no connection with his father or Burma. But of course, because of the color of his skin, people constantly react to him, especially like new people who meet him, and he becomes an actor. And so in his acting career, this has a lot of significance. And so how it describes this experience of him being an outsider, but at the same time thoroughly English and part of this culture and nation, and going to a boarding school and being having received a privileged education, but at the same time there are challenges that are presented to him where he receives some quite open prejudice, but then also forms some really valuable connections with other people. And so yeah, I found this so like meaningful and enjoyable, especially as the novel went on and he started to revisit locations from his past. And so the way that this novel portrays the process of aging and how memory works as we age, and our connection to physical locations changes over time, because there's an emotional layer to these physical places that we've grown up in and had significant experiences in, and I thought that was so beautifully portrayed in this book. And I think that the whole thing was really powerfully done. It's probably one of my favorite books by Alan Hollinghurst that I've read. I think he's an incredible writer. Really powerful book. So those are the novels that I read over the past month. I would love to hear if you have read any of these books, or if you're interested in reading any of them now, or if you want to let me know about anything else that you read in November that you would recommend or not recommend. I would love to hear about that in the comments below. But I hope you have a wonderful December and lead up in the time to the holiday season. I know it's really difficult to make time for reading at this time, but hope you get a chance to read some things as well. There's many more books that I want to cram in before the end of the year, but it is quite difficult because it's such a busy time. But hope you're doing well, and I will speak to you again soon. Bye bye.